360 TV proudly presents Messages of Inspirational Stories, broadcasting and live streaming to millions of devices around the world, including Roku, and live streaming to Facebook Live. Also on Amazon Fire TV and to Twitch. Also Android TV and Periscope. Broadcasting to Apple TV and YouTube Live. Proudly brought to you by our host, Donna producer and host, Michaela Vidal, host and administrator, and Jim Grant, producer and host. Proudly brought to you by the 6minutewebinar.com.
Good afternoon and welcome to Messages of Inspirational Stories. Well, we are super excited to be here today, and folks, I'm hoping that I can get Jim to behave because he really likes to mess with the backstage pictures.
Well, we're getting ready to go live, and I click on the little icons there on our pictures and all, and I take us backstage. And Donna, she's like, "Oh, we're not gonna be on stage. Oh my goodness, you know."
I didn't think my voice went that high.
Well, I'm glad yours does and mine doesn't, but it doesn't go that high. No, it doesn't.
Well, we're talking today about the challenge of change. Mm-hmm. And that can be very, very difficult for a lot of people. Yeah.
Because as people, we don't normally like change in our life.
Right.
Especially when it's not our idea.
Well, and especially if it's uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
If it's uncomfortable. But, we've read it, but it bears saying again, Jim, through change and adversity
comes growth.
Comes amazing things.
Mm-hmm. Comes growth. It sure does.
Yep. That growth is huge. And you can't get growth unless you have change.
That's right.
So first thing is you have to be completely open to it. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm. You certainly do, because especially in one of the topics we're going to be talking about today, Susan B. Anthony, she went against the grain. And one of the things that really squelches growth is for people to have that old school attitude.
Right.
Well, we've always done it that way.
Right. Ain't no need to change it now, folks.
That's right. And I always think about Henry Ford when he was cranking out the cars and all the hundreds of car manufacturers that was popping up on the scene. Mm-hmm. And there had to be some horse and buggy guys as well. We've always had horse and buggies, and they've always been around for thousands of years. They'll be here for another 1,000.
Right.
When's the last time you saw a horse and buggy dealership?
Right.
But I mean, that's that old school, that old world thinking.
Right.
That it gives a false justification that you should continue on.
Right.
Rather than have an open mind and say, how can I embrace this change? How can we expand? Because it's all about expansion.
Right.
Isn't it, Donna?
It is. And the other thing is looking at it, okay, if we're open to this and everyone buys in, we talked about that yesterday. When you are talking and presenting an idea, you need to talk with your team, mm-hmm. not to your team.
That's right.
Right? But you have to say to yourself and then everyone else, okay, this change is coming about because X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. But here is what I am seeing. This is what I see is going to be better for, for the company, for the mm-hmm. business, and for you.
Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the things that I don't think would be that difficult, and a lot of supervisors and leaders and people who have people scattered all over, from here to Timbuktu and back, is to say, we know the pandemic has, changed everything. We've had to adjust to it
Right.
because everything digital, go into Zooms, have all these electronic meetings and all that.
Yep.
Now that is the standard. Now, how can we use this to our advantage to really blossom and grow?
Right.
And if you talk with your team and say, looking for some ideas here.
Right. Let them help.
Yeah, let them buy in on it, because you know what? They may have a better idea than anybody else.
Right.
Who was it that I'm trying to remember the guy? He said, if I want to know anything, I can't remember his name. He says, I want to go talk to the janitor, because the janitor is all over the place. He hears and sees a lot of things.
Yep. That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense, Jim.
Yeah, and he says that at least the janitor will tell me the truth.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I
But
wish I could remember who said that. I really do.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But it makes sense. And the thing is that when you're talking with your team and you're asking them for ideas, guys, we are kind of in a challenging time. The reason is they're the boots on the ground.
Yes.
They
Yes.
are the boots on the ground of your company.
Mhm. They are the heartbeat, and they're the ones that normally, you supervisors, listen up. You want to make sure you are communicating directly with, like the one guy says, talking to the janitor, be sure and talk with the people who are talking directly to the customers.
Right.
They're the ones that's hearing, well, why don't we do this, or why don't you have that, or how come we got to do it like this? They're the ones that's getting feedback from the customers.
Right.
And that's where you need to get your information from. It's critical. It really
Right.
is.
And every department, because when you have a company and every department feeds off the other department, right? It's a well-oiled machine. And if one of those chains or the ball bearings goes straight out, everything is stopped.
Mm-hmm. And there's one thing that I always liked to do when I was a course manager with the reserves, and I had all these instructors under me. I only had 2 meetings. That was it. 2 general meetings. I had a pre-camp meeting to brief everybody so that everybody knew where everybody was and everybody knew what the mission was. And if there's any questions on where we're going to get copies made, where we're going to do this, whatever, everybody was on the same sheet of music. And then at the very end, I would have the second general meeting to make sure all the hand receipts got turned in, were clear, but kind of like a wrap up.
Right.
But during the process, if I had something to discuss with, a certain group of instructors, I would go to them. And Donna, my point being, and you've probably seen this, how many times have we been in meetings and 70% of the time is taken up by one department that
Right.
wants to explain why they are if they were not there, this thing would fold up and go down the river in a boat.
Right. The whole thing would fall.
And people are sitting there, and we're all in the same boat. We're thinking about, well, I
Right.
need to get out of here.
Because
I forgot to do
because
that yesterday.
everything has to work in tandem.
Yes.
And right, it has to work in perfect tandem. And unfortunately, perfect is not a reality.
No, not by any stretch of the
Perfect is
imagination.
not a reality. So things aren't always going to be smooth. And that's why leading through change and adversity is so important, and accepting the challenge of change.
Yeah. Embrace it.
Oh, absolutely.
And change is coming. Embrace it.
Right.
Because if ever change was a train wreck, that would be different. But how many changes that come along are, like a breath of fresh air?
Right.
And they can help you expand when you've been trying to do things the old school way. And now this change is coming along, enables you to be able to expand with the help of your team.
Yeah.
With the help of your team. That's the secret sauce, as people like to say nowadays.
Right. Now, it's funny because I remember when my children were teenagers
Hmm.
and I was a single mom. If you've listened to the show, we've talked about that. I was a single mom raising my children, and they're like, well, we don't get an allowance and we're doing chores. And I'm like, you're right. And I'm sorry. I wish I could give you an allowance, but I can't.
Hmm.
I said, but here's what I'll do. First of all, let's stop and discuss this for a minute. You're upset because you're doing chores and you don't get paid for it. So, okay, I hear what you're saying. Now, take a breath back, step back, and look at this. I go to work. I work 7 days a week. I pay all the bills. I do, an awful lot of the cleaning and making sure that the meals are made and all the bills are paid, and I don't get any extra for it. And my kids kind of looked at me, and I said, exactly. We are a team. This nuclear family is a team. And there
Hmm.
isn't one of us that just makes a mess. We all make a mess. So we have to all be part of the process.
Hmm.
And I said, what I will do is, because I can't give you an allowance every week, but I will, if you give me time, advance notice, I will give you money when you want to go out with your friends. You want to go to a
Hmm.
movie, or you want to go out and, steak and
Hmm.
shake or whatever, the local hangout, a movie.
Hmm.
You know what? And it worked out pretty well.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. One of the things that I had to train uh, my people at work, employees, was the fact that in the supply room, when you go get something, don't wait until the shelf is bare. Don't
Right?
go in there and then say, "Hey, we're out of this." I'm going
Right.
like, "Well, good grief!" When you get down to the last two or the last one, depending on the frequency, well, take for example, like we used to have these little bearings that we used to replace in our saws because they were running all the time, and the bearings would wear out and they'd start
Right.
squealing. So we had to shut the saw off and replace the bearings. And so I like to keep, 6 or 8 of them, be deep in them, and just let me know, put write down and, write down the little, we had a little clipboard there, write it down what we need. And every Monday we'll tear that off and order it, and
Right.
make sure. And, once you get them to understand the why,
Right.
that's the key.
And it makes the
Understand,
process so much smoother,
sure,
so
because
much easier.
they don't like to go in there and going to do something and ain't got the part to do it.
Right.
And if they understand that the reason why the system broke down that prevented us from ordering the parts in enough time to be able to keep adequate supply there. Once they
Right.
understood that and bought in on that, it made everybody's life easier. And that's
Right.
just one little tiny example
Right.
of something that's simple. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. And it's sometimes just in the way it is presented,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Like with my children, I had to present it in, I don't sugarcoat anything. And I presented it with the facts, there's just me. Yeah, Jim's acted all surprised. But it's just me. So, there isn't enough money left over for me to just give you guys, a weekly allowance. I wish I could, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't. So this is the next best thing that I can do, right? So that you have, some time with your friends and that growing, maturing time. I get all that. But when I presented it with the fact of to my youngest daughter, all three of my kids, I took turns and just said, do you make the only mess in this house? Well, no. And then it got him to thinking, oh, okay, makes more sense now.
Yeah, it really does
Buy in.
because, yeah, because employees and subordinates and kids, they only, unless you communicate with them, they can only look at what's in it for them. They look in their arena
Right.
only. They don't broaden the area of consideration into the other areas that, affect the entire operations. What we're
Right.
talking
They
about.
only see what's in front of them.
That's right. And when you explain it to them and get them to think outside the box, that's when you can get them to buy in on what you're saying and understand the process of why you do what you do.
And
That's critical.
and that's when growth happens.
It sure does. It sure does. And I remember a man that he used to give away $100 bills, and he'd have meetings. And this was back in the 80s.
Ooh,
And he was sitting there and he would call
100 bucks
in.
in the 80s. Wow.
Yeah, he wasn't playing around
Right.
because someone, come up with a good idea. He'd throw him $100 bill. So, boy, there was all kind of, people go there, they weren't sitting there,
Right. They were
with,
participating.
oh, yeah, because if it was a bona fide good idea, $100 was right there. Boom, here you go. And of course, I realize, with money like that, I mean, you're going to wake some people up. But it was very, very thrilling because I was able to witness that one time.
Right.
And I told him later, I says, I don't work here, but could I give a good idea and get on? I mean, hey, all they could say is no.
Right.
I might be $100 richer, but it didn't work out like that. So I got depressed and left.
Oh, Jim, I'm sorry. It's such a sad story.
Oh, I know it. I know it. But
I'm sorry. We want to talk about Susan B. Anthony. And there's several reasons, but the biggest reason is this is a woman who worked tirelessly for women's rights.
mm-hmm.
And she was the foundation of that in our country here in the United States. So you talk about the challenge of change and what she went through and adversity. Holy smokes.
Susan B. Anthony, she not only stepped on some big toes, she stomped on them,
Yes, she did.
And, there was guys that were accusing her because I imagine a lot of women during that time just kind of like, in shock or standing back and saying, I want to see how this plays out.
Right.
They may not have said anything to their significant other or to the man in their life, but a lot of the men, they accused her of trying to destroy the sanctity of marriage.
Right, because she thought women should be more than barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen.
Yeah, she sure did. And, she was really challenging some old world and old school thinking.
Big time.
And, the guys were just scared to death of her. I mean, there was a lot of hatred towards her because she was coming out and she was just saying, enough is enough of the nonsense.
Right.
You're wiping your feet on people,
Right. And it's interesting because she was that way from an early age. Now, she was born into a Quaker family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Quaker families, and I don't have tons of knowledge on this, but Quaker families, there is a place and thing for each and every person to do. And back in the 1820s, it wasn't what she was doing. I can guarantee you that.
Because at the age of 17, she was already collecting anti-slavery petitions.
Yes.
So you figure she was born in 1820 at age 17, that would be 1837. That is almost 30 years before the war between the states, commonly known as the Civil War.
Right.
So you can see how far ahead of her time she was.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't like anything that happened was going to stop her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she had an absolute constitution, dedication, and vision that nothing was going to stand in her way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She played a very pivotal role in women's suffrage, the
Well,
movement.
she was moved to Rochester, New York,
Uh-huh.
and in 1872, she was arrested in Rochester for voting in violation of laws that allowed only men to vote.
Mm.
She was convicted in a widely publicized trial. And although she refused to pay the fine, the authorities declined to take further action in 1878.
Mm.
So she was arrested in 1872, and pretty much it ended for that whole issue in 1878.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she was just a leader on all fronts
She was.
when it came to what was right,
Hmm.
not only for women but also for this slavery deal. This is not right.
Absolutely.
I mean, she knew it was not right for women to just be walked all over, and she also knew that slavery was a horrible thing.
Absolutely.
And for some of the, and we still have this mindset in the world today. And I might get in trouble with some of the guys, but that's okay. I don't get Christmas cards from them anyway. But a lot of the old world thinking, especially from men, my goodness gracious, you think you're the head of the household. Well, you are. But with that comes accountability and responsibility to treat everyone in your house with love, compassion, respect, and you demonstrate that you
Right.
are a good, level headed leader that does not use and abuse people. And that
Hmm.
includes jealousy, that includes talking down to the little woman, that includes all of that. If that upsets you, there's a red X up there on the corner. Click on it and have a nice day, sir.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
very serious about that because when it comes to mistreating people, that is just that
There's
fire. Just ask one of my former son-in-laws how I feel about him hitting my daughter.
right,
Enough said.
right, right. Yeah, that is just inexcusable.
Yes,
It's inexcusable.
yes.
And the thing is that she lived her life by her conviction. And she
Mm,
knew going through this, Jim, that she was going to lead the change.
yeah.
And she
Mm,
knew that in back in the 1800s, that her time frame of life, that the adversity that she was going to be up against I mean, let's be honest, it was nothing like it is today. We think it's difficult
oh.
today. Holy smokes. Nothing
Mm-mm,
compared to what that woman went through.
mm.
Nothing. And
You are.
even back then, she was giving 75 to 100 speeches a year
Mhm.
in her lifetime.
Wow, that's amazing.
Hmm.
And I was reading up on her life, and you may have seen something on it, but I haven't discovered it yet. But I would imagine somewhere along the line, they were probably death threats against her.
I
They would,
would not be
they,
surprised.
they would have to be because when you start messing with the old world thinking,
Oh, yeah.
you start upsetting the apple cart. You're talking
Uh,
about. I mean, come on now. They want women to vote. Are you kidding me? The next
well,
thing you know, they'll
they're
let
not
them be
even
flying
smart enough.
airplanes. Yeah,
They're not even smart enough.
I know it. I mean, you're talking about going against, when you go against those old school beliefs, that's like going against their religion.
Right,
And people
right.
will shoot you over over their religion. If
Absolutely. Absolutely. She met a woman in 1851, Elizabeth
Right.
Cady Stanton,
Hmm.
and they became best friends and co-workers on social reform, primarily in the field, not totally, but primarily in the field of women's rights. So in
Hmm.
1852, they founded New York Women's State Temperance Society.
Mm.
And Anthony was prevented from speaking at a temperance conference because she was female.
Mm.
In 1863, they founded the Women's Loyal National League, which
Mm.
conducted, are you ready for this? The largest petition drive in the United States history up to that time,
Mhm.
collecting nearly 400,000 signatures in support of the abolishment of slavery.
Wow. And you know what? Those 400,000 signatures, there was no vehicles. And Donna, there wasn't even any internet back then. But I mean, think about the hard legwork, the
Oh
sweat
my
equity
God.
to do that,
Yeah.
the commitment. Oh my
Right.
gosh.
Right.
I mean, it would be hard pressed for me to get 400,000
Right.
signatures or anybody, really.
Right. And we have everything at our fingertips, Jim.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
mean, we got,
that is amazing.
that's what really made an impression on me when I read that, Donna. 400,000 signatures. Oh my
Right.
gosh.
And then they initiated in 1866 the
Hmm.
American Equal Rights Association,
Hmm.
which campaigned for equal rights for both women and African Americans.
How about that?
In
Huh.
1868, they began publishing a newspaper called The Revolution. I mean,
Ooh.
this right falls right into, we're not having a New Year's resolution, we're having a New Year's revolution.
We did, and it's all Donna's fault. She started it, so you know how these women are. You give them an inch and they take a mile.
Right? Oh my gosh. But honestly, Jim, and I know you've read this article too,
Yes, ma'am.
but the amount of things that these women opened up and started
Mhm.
is absolutely awe inspiring,
It really is. I mean,
right?
these women, they had drive and they had commitment. And with all the adversities that they ran into, all of the friction that they ran into, it did not. I'm sure at times there had to be times when they felt kind of tired, dealing with some of the Neanderthals,
Right?
the bonehead people that were so men that were so hard headed. I mean, sometimes I pick on men too much. That's okay. You know, if they don't like it, well, they can complain to Donna. She'll complain to me, and I'll start behaving myself. That's the way that works. Okay. But
Oh
no,
my goodness.
sincerely, I mean, the type of friction she ran into.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, her and her partner there, they probably felt like at times they were pushing a chain uphill. Oh, but it's evidenced by the time frame. If you look at the time frame, there's one thing that's very evident that just stands head and shoulders up, and that one thing is this: they did not quit.
They did not back down either.
Amen. That is huge, isn't it?
That is huge. They had
Mm.
they had a lot of fortitude. Let's put it that way.
Amen.
They had a lot of fortitude,
You got to tip your hat to those ladies because they were the real deal.
right? And so, it goes on in this article. It's just amazing that in 1878,
Mhm.
Anthony and Stanton arranged for Congress to be presented with an amendment giving women the right to vote, introduced by Senator Aaron Sargent, Republican of California. It later became known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment.
Mm.
It was eventually ratified as the 19th Amendment to our U.S. Constitution in 1920.
Wow. That's really amazing. I mean, think about this. This was a girl that was born in a Quaker family. And, she didn't have a lot of money, or she wasn't
Oh,
born with
no.
the silver spoon in her mouth or anything like that. But what she had was a compassionate heart for people who suffered.
Right.
Susan B. Anthony, normally you think about women, but she also was an advocate for the African American,
Mhm.
especially the slaves.
All of the slaves,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
But primarily, of course, at that time,
Hmm.
the slavery we had with, um, that what she was a precursor to it.
Yes, yes, she
She was a
was.
precursor,
And
really.
I'm surprised during the Black History Month that they don't mention something about her because of her efforts and her work. I mean,
Right,
sure, she wasn't black, but she was played a big part in the Black history.
right, right.
Ah, the lady
And
was.
it's
Go ahead.
interesting. She died, Jim, in 1906,
Hmm.
and our 19th Amendment didn't take place until 1920. So
Hmm.
all these years she worked tirelessly
Hmm.
and never got to see it. She never got to see it come to fruition.
Mm, that's true. That's true. I didn't. I'm glad you picked up on that because I didn't. And you're right. She was 86 years young when she died on March the
Mhm.
13th, 1906. But still, the momentum and the energy that she created carried on.
Right.
That's huge.
Right. I mean, I can't imagine a 17-year-old at that time
Oh,
going
yeah.
out and getting petitions to abolish slavery,
Yeah.
let alone a 17-year-old Quaker girl.
Yeah. You're exactly right. Because a 17-year-old girl is normally just, even back then, they
Oh,
were
they
they
were
were
married by
mainly.
then.
Yeah, he's been married because he got married around 14, didn't he?
Yeah,
14
sometimes
or something.
13,
Yeah.
right?
Boy, I'm sure glad that old school thinking went away. Can you
Yeah,
imagine
me
getting
too.
married at 13? You miss
No.
all the fun of your teenage years. I
Oh
mean,
my goodness.
you wouldn't be able to miss a few curves, skin your ignorance, and get in trouble.
Right?
As I understand, that's what some of them did, the teenagers, not me, of course.
Yeah, you wouldn't know a darn thing about that. But I think it's and I love that we, put this together to talk about it because
Hmm.
if anybody had a challenge to change something,
Oh, yeah.
she was going after two evils, if you will. The fact that women weren't allowed to vote and
Hmm.
that, to abolish slavery.
Oh, yeah.
And she was just absolutely dug in. She was not budging.
Hmm.
And, I can only imagine the trials and tribulations, Jim,
Mm.
that she went through in
Mm.
doing her life's calling.
Oh, yeah. Because you got to understand in that time, down in the South and slavery and all that, some of the slave owners, they
Yeah.
would pay a lot of money for a young man
Or woman.
or woman. And I mean, make them free. Well, who's going to pay me for that? They're going to
Right.
lose all that money. So you can understand the friction there. I mean, they besides they were a commodity. As sad as it is to say that, but I mean, you got to look at it from their perspective too of why there was so much hatred about that. We know it was wrong.
Right.
It's wrong on all fronts.
Absolutely.
But all of the hard headedness and all of the resistance, a lot of it came from the fact that they had paid good money for those people,
Right.
and nobody was going to pay them back. You know,
Right.
that's that would that just added fuel to the fire. And here comes a 17-year-old girl talking about, hey,
A
collect.
Quaker girl.
Yeah. Oh man. Mm.
it's
That was a
very
young
interesting.
that was a young lady that definitely knew her calling. She knew her mission in
She
life.
absolutely did. And I'm really honored that somebody like that in our history, um, that they did so much, not only to change the wrongs that were
Mhm.
going on, but that they gave everything they had and sort of
Mhm.
led the way for the rest of us.
Oh, yeah. And I know that and Donna, you and I know from many friends that we've got, we know in many parts of the world, there are women who are tired of the suffrage that they've been under the rule of.
Yeah.
And I would encourage those ladies to take a strong look at Susan B. Anthony's life, because we talked about the New Year Revolution when we first started 2022, but people everywhere, male and female alike, they're
Yep.
tired of the doom and the gloom. I mean, look at all the ladies that I know, they're ambassadors for women's movements and children.
Right.
I mean, there is a bunch of them out there. And guys, you cannot squelch, this type of thing, because there I really believe, Donna, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I really believe that ladies look up to men for leadership and respect them if they are leaders, number one, number two, respectable.
Absolutely.
That's a prerequisite. And if you don't demonstrate that, I mean, they're not going to follow you. They're not even going to listen to you.
Right.
You might as well go dial a prayer or something. Maybe that person on the other end will talk to you.
But it's funny because, at least for me, the older I get,
Hmm.
um, and I keep coming back with age comes wisdom, and dang if it ain't true, but it is amazing because you can tell, like I couldn't tell in my 20s and probably couldn't tell in my 30s. In my 40s, uh, there was so much going on raising three teenagers and all my surgeries and going into my early 50s.
Hmm.
But I can tell now what I couldn't tell then is
Hmm.
when I talk to a man, I can tell his strength of character
Yes.
by how he talks.
Hmm.
And, so if he has respect and love for himself, Jim, then that's going to ooze out because he doesn't need to be braggadocious,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Hmm. I was just smiling because I was thinking Don's going to say, with wisdom comes, I know when to say, I don't care. That's
Well,
what I was
there is
sitting.
that too.
That's why I was sitting there smiling, ladies and gentlemen, because, Donna, she's the type of person that when she believes in something, it's 100%. But nonsense and a bunch of yakety sacks, she practices her Spanish. It's el mucho, el hadioso, goodbye. Oh.
Yeah, something like that, Jim.
Yeah. But see, that is really a strength because you don't allow people like that to consume your time.
I'm not going to allow them to poison my world.
There you go. There you go.
I'm not
There you
going to
go.
allow people
Hmm.
who are like that to
Hmm.
poison my energy. I work really hard to keep a good balanced energy around me,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? And it's not going to break to let somebody in. And that's not to say that we don't meet them.
Hmm.
Again, that can be, gosh, that's a challenge of change. You may meet somebody that you may necessarily not particularly care for.
Hmm.
Okay. So now you have an adversity with that,
Hmm.
but you have to work with them. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to find a way to get through that change, right? And that challenge.
You certainly do. As you're sitting there, Donna, I'm thinking about from very often, as a matter of fact, I get requests from people that want to. And this lady this morning sent me a message, and she says, "How did she say it?" Says, "I'm interested in collaborating."
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going like, well, I don't really collaborate. I do work with people, but what's really happening is that when you're getting attention, when you're doing things that for the right reason, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the benefit of others. Others see that, and you don't see the end result like they do, and then they'll want to come and collaborate with you. And that's fine, and we'd like to work with people and help people and all that. But at the same time, uh, the problem I've got, Donna, is that sometimes I don't want that to become a distraction to me because I've got too
Right.
much commitment to other things I've already committed to.
Right. And where we're at right now, Jim and I,
Mhm.
we are about as full up as we can be.
Yeah, and we just we don't want to take on anything more. And the reason I bring that up is because if you are successful in life and people are wanting to have you consume your time, beware of that because you can't serve 1,000 people.
Right. And it's important to know that the first person you have to serve
Hmm.
is yourself.
Hmm.
You have to.
Hmm.
One of the other things that has been a challenge for me is that when people do that with me, Jim, the same thing they say, well,
Oh
let's
yeah,
collaborate.
yeah.
Usually what that means for where I'm at right now in my life,
Hmm.
usually that means they say, let's collaborate. This is so and so. And then
Yeah.
they list all their credentials. And then at the end, they say, I would really, really, really like to be on your TV show.
Yeah, that's what we run into all the time.
And it's not that, that they're doing anything wrong. They're doing a bang up
Mm-mm.
job in their life, but
Hmm.
that's not what we do.
Mm-mm.
So it's not something that we can
Embrace.
collaborate. Right.
Yeah,
We can't embrace it. We can't collaborate with them because it's
yeah.
not in our arena.
You're exactly right because there are shows out there that have guest speakers and all that, and that's fine. But our particular model is not like that. It
No.
really isn't.
We
And
very seldom have guests.
that's right. And when we do, those guests are definitely handpicked, and they add to the theme
Right. They add
of.
to the information and give
Mhm.
more information.
They're a
To
subject matter expert that can really bless people.
absolutely,
And when you
absolutely.
and when you first started out about one of the things you got to put up with, I'm going like, oh, she's going to mention my name.
Two
Oh,
truths, one dare. Dang it.
hey, we want to play that two truths and one lie game again because that was fun.
Or one lie. Yeah, or
Yeah.
maybe a different one. So I think we're
Okay.
gonna do that on Friday for the last 20-25 minutes of the show because
Oh
oh
boy.
my gosh, we had so much fun with
Hey,
that.
I'll bring popcorn, folks.
He's that means he's going to eat it all and he's not going to share. So don't get your hopes up.
I'll just we got to eat popcorn. You know what eat popcorn is?
Eat pop it yourself.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I one of the things going back really quick to Susan B. Anthony
Yes.
is that she started out with such an arduous journey ahead of her,
Mm.
right? And went through the whole gamut of, being told she was breaking up marriages, everything, and everything she was doing was wrong, getting arrested. And so her name was pretty much mud for a long time. As
Hmm.
time evolved, though, people began to see the truth of what she saw at such an early age. And this is interesting. Her 80th birthday, because over time her perception in public had changed. And by her 80th birthday, she was celebrated in the White House at the invitation of President William McKinney.
That's incredible,
And
isn't it?
right, and then she became the first female citizen to be depicted on US coinage when her portrait appeared in 1979 dollar coin.
The Susan B. Anthony dollar coin.
Mhm. And
I
let me
remember.
tell you, folks, if if you're a little young for that, that was huge when that
Yeah.
happened. And then the
Yeah.
stamp came out. Remember that?
I sure
Yep.
do. Yeah. It was really something because it was showing respect for her accomplishments, her commitment, even though, it was in her honor and her memory.
Right.
And my goodness, I mean, you think about, I know there's people around the world, ladies around the world, who are looking for this type of leadership.
Right.
And there's ladies who are ambassadors around the world who are setting the standard. And I would encourage all of them to study up on the life of Susan B. Anthony, because the obstacles that you're facing, they are nothing compared to what Susan B. Anthony, because she came out of nowhere and she's upsetting the apple cart. I mean, at age 17 in 1837, anti-slavery stuff. That
Well,
was
back
all, yeah,
then, women weren't really, especially the Quakers.
yeah,
You weren't allowed to talk to people that you
yeah.
didn't know.
That's right.
It was considered way forward.
Yes, women were not allowed to even speak to strange men or to men that they even knew in public,
Right.
other than morning, something like that.
Right.
Not make eye contact. It was considered vulgar.
Right.
That's the word it was considered, vulgar. That's why women, had clothes from their chin all the way down to their feet, and it was just considered vulgar. They squelched everything about the female. They really
Right.
did, though. And I mean, goodness, if a woman spoke out in church, oh boy, can't have that.
But it's interesting. So when you look at the challenge and the
Mm,
change in
mm.
your life, one of the things that I would recommend is go back through history and find somebody whom is interesting, like Susan B. Anthony, and there are many others,
Oh yeah.
many others, and find out a little bit about their life, because it might give you some insight into how you are leading through your change in adversity, and
Hmm.
maybe give you some vigor,
Oh yeah.
give you a little excitement on it.
Hmm. I'll tell you exactly how that's going to happen. Once you start reading up on people who went through, trials and tribulations like Susan B. Anthony and others that they were like Martin Luther King,
Mhm.
trailblazers. I mean, oh man, Martin
Oh,
Luther King was I love his comment about, don't judge me because, and I paraphrase that, you don't judge a person by the color of their skin, but the content of their character.
right.
And
He
he was so on that.
Oh, he was amazing. He was
Yes.
amazing.
Yes. And then when you study those lives and you appreciate what they did for society, then when you go to bed at night and in the morning, some of the clouds are going to be, when you wake up, the clouds are going to be disappearing. You're going to be able to find some nuggets of truth
Yeah.
that you can build on. And that's what you're searching for. That's
Mhm.
precisely what you're searching for.
Yep. And nothing is more exciting than getting your aha moment in change.
Mm, yeah.
Getting your aha moment in change. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday, Jim.
Hmm.
Have when you were looking at an issue or a change, right, leading through the change and adversity of whatever it is you're going through,
Hmm.
sit down with those that work with you and
Amen.
talk with them and bring them in and get some ideas. I mean, honestly, masterminds, those mini masterminds, which is truly just a really great conversation, and then the ideas start coming, because
Mm.
everybody gets to participate, right?
Hmm.
Everybody gets to have a say.
Oh
But
yeah.
that's when my gosh, that's when the miracles can happen, Jim.
It really does. Like yesterday, I shared some things I may not have may not have shared on the air, but I did because I'm just open and candid like that. But I will say on that day, that call started for me at 2 p.m. and it went on for an hour. Of course, we had pre-recorded the show for that day to be able to cover the show, because we knew we were going to have this meeting come up. And so at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, we had the general meeting with the four of us, and that's when everything just popped right up like popcorn in front of us. And this is what we're going to do. Okay,
Right.
because the energy led us there.
Right.
And then after everyone left, me and Emerson are on the phone, and we're on there we're on a Zoom call. We're on there for another hour, and then I finally get off of that, and then I take a necessary break, and I get a message on my phone, and someone else wanted my attention, and I'm trying to remember now who it was. And I finally got off the phone at 5:30. So I had about 3.5 hours, and there was 2 necessary breaks. I'm trying to remember who that third person was now.
I don't know who it could be, Jim. Huh. Huh.
It was Donna Sue.
Yes,
but
it was.
but when we got to talking, here's the beauty in the masterminds. Time flies.
Right.
It don't seem like an hour. It
Right.
seems more like 15 or 20 minutes maybe, because
Right.
you're covering some things and you're jotting down things and you're adding to, and ideas are coming to you, and it's electrifying.
Right.
And it's it
It
didn't seem like
stimulates the process.
yeah.
It stimulates the process, and
Mhm.
leading through change is so beautiful when you're surrounded with the
Mhm.
right people.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's electrifying, Donna. It really truly is. I mean, in my life, looking back, there's been times I've had meetings and I've conducted meetings and I've been in meetings and they were just not good meetings. They really
Right.
weren't. They were just bleh. Everybody was glad whenever it was over,
Right.
including me when I was conducting the meeting. Well, I'm glad that's over. Whew. That's a lot of fun. Yeah. Hmm. Next time I have a meeting, I bet nobody will come. But I mean,
Oh,
that was before I had the experience and the knowledge and the wisdom on how to conduct a meeting.
right.
And I share that with you just for the sake of saying, so what if you're not very experienced in conducting meetings? So what? It doesn't matter. You know,
Right.
we start on new projects just about every week, it seems like. But our
Just about.
attitude is we don't worry about the process. We focus on the content because the energy will
Right.
actually iron out the wrinkles for us as we go along.
Right. We
And
don't let it bog us down to the point where we're, our stomach's turning and we
oh
can't
yeah.
think straight and we can't eat.
Mhm.
So, just some of our sharing some of our nuggets, if you will, that work for us. And
Oh
of
yeah.
course, everybody works different, but
Mhm.
man, for example, I love our team meetings.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
love our team meetings when we
Yeah. Mm.
get together with Gaia and Michaela, and we talk,
Mhm.
and we'll go through, and everybody has time to talk. Everybody has time to make suggestions.
We
Hey, this
spent an hour and
a half.
a half
Hmm.
on that team meeting,
Yeah.
and it was just amazing because I didn't realize it was that long.
Right.
And Gaia had comments to say, and Michaela had comments to
Yep.
say, and we all had comments to say, and that's the beauty in the mastermind. I want to use this example real quickly before we go. We're almost out of time. But take a flashlight, just a plain 2D cell flashlight. You turn it on, it's got so much light. If you put on a longer sleeve or barrel on the flashlight, where you can put in 4 batteries, and then put the end on it and turn it on, what happens to the light?
Gets brighter.
It gets a lot brighter because it's got more energy there.
Right.
The same is true in a mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's why masterminds are so electrifying and so much fun. And I encourage you, we talked about last week on how to, get pals and stuff like that. Look for pals in a mastermind, just have a meeting of the mind. I mean, you may have 3 or 4 friends that don't have anybody in their life. And of course, Monday was Valentine's. Well, hey, have a mastermind on it, set up
Right.
and, what can we do? How can we meet people?
Right.
That's worth a meeting. And
Exactly.
the first thing a girl will say, well, let's don't go to bars. Amen to that,
Right.
I had a good friend of mine. We'll tell a funny story out of school. I went over to this place. This is when I lived in Arizona. And he came in from riding his horse. He still had his spurs on. And it was hot. And it was really hot. And he says, Jim, you know what I want? I said, what's that? He said, I want a cold beer and I ain't got any. And I said, well, what shall we do about it? He said, let's just go down here to the bar about a half a mile down the road and we'll get one. I said, okay. So he didn't even take his spurs off. And so we go in there, we're drinking a beer, and then he gets up and goes to the restroom, jingle, 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 with those spurs a jingle. And he comes back. And the little barmaid there, she says, why are you wearing spurs? And he said, without missing a beat, he said, well, in case I have too much to drink, he said, this way Jim can just tilt me back and roll me right out of here.
I love it. I love it.
I started to crack up. I just had to throw that joke in there. I'm
That's
in a good
awesome.
mood.
That's awesome. Well, tomorrow we're going to talk about how leaders handle adversity.
Oh,
When
yeah.
things are difficult, how do you get through them?
Amen.
So that's going to be an interesting show.
Oh, yeah, sure will be, because we can also share things that we've seen in our life where leaders, drop the ball.
Right.
And I've dropped the ball in that department too. So that's
Yep.
okay. That's why you want to love yourself first and
Give yourself grace,
to
folks.
forgive yourself. And when you make a mistake, own it, no big deal. No big deal, because people will respect that if you do.
Well, Jim, we are out of time.
Out of quarters too, huh?
Yeah, you didn't get enough.
That sounds like one of them personnel problems.
Right. So get some more for tomorrow so we
There
can
you go.
keep the
I'll
show
go to the
going.
ATM, and come back with a wheelbarrow. But we've had a wonderful time with you. We sincerely hope that we've inspired you, especially you ladies out there, especially ones in other countries, foreign countries. Take a look at Martin Luther King's life and spend a lot of time with Susan B. Anthony. You can Google her and read up about her. And remember that she went against the establishment before women could even hardly say anything. Women couldn't vote. Women weren't supposed to talk or, voice their opinion. That was considered rude and vulgar in those days.
Right.
Yeah, it really was. So anyway, take a look at that. Remember to love yourself first and forgive yourself. Donna and I really hope and pray that you and your loved ones are healthy, happy, and safe. And we also hope and pray that you and your loved ones are blessed in all areas of your life. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.